China is one of several countries voicing concerns about Japan's plan to release treated water from the Fukushima nuclear power disaster. The International Atomic Energy Agency insists it's safe to release the water into the ocean. The head of the agency is taking that message to people living near the crippled power plant. Jack Barton has more from Fukushima.
The Director General of the UN's nuclear agency, Rafael Grossi, meeting with officials, fishermen and locals in Fukushima, having already given the green light for the release of contaminated water from the Daiichi nuclear power plant. The head of the local fishing association told Grossi his group remains opposed to the plan.
The doubts and the concerns that
Grossi responded that he did not have a magic wand to dispel doubts, but that the UN agency is committed to the scheme.
we are going to stay here. We are going to stay here with you for decades to come, until the last drop of the water which is accumulated around the reactor has been safely discharged.
The mayor of Iwaki town, where the meeting was held, told Japanese officials the priority should now be transparency and information, not a rush to release the water. The Japanese government is yet to announce when it will begin releasing the contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean. Some people here were reassured by Grossi's face-to-face with locals.
Many things have happened prior to this meeting, and my opinion is that many of the local people are calmly accepting this.
But others say the plan represents a setback to a region just getting back on its feet.
Sort of they started to rebuild, and they are quite comfortably recovered after the disaster. And now that all the wastewater goes into the ocean, that would affect the people, and I don't really feel safe at all.
After the meeting, Grossi visited the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. It is here that the IAEA is setting up its permanent monitoring team to oversee the discharge of the water.
By and large, I think that all the basic elements are in place in case the government takes a decision to move forward with this.
After Japan, Grossi heads to countries including South Korea and the Pacific Islands, where there are lingering concerns over the release. Jack Barton, CGTN, Fukushima.
Beijing says the IAEA report should not be considered a green light for Japan's controversial plan. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs says there are still safety questions, and it's urging Japan to consider other methods to handle the contaminated water.
The report cannot guarantee the justification, legitimacy, safety, or effective monitoring of Japan's ocean discharge plan. Facts have proved that the report did little to quell strong opposition from its citizens and the international community. China's relevant departments will strengthen marine environmental monitoring and strict quarantine and inspection of imported seafood to ensure public health and food safety.
For more on this, let's bring in Yiyang Shen. He's the director of the Inclusive Development Research Center in Beijing. We'll get to China's concerns in just a bit, but let me start by just saying the prefecture is still recovering from the tsunami and the nuclear disaster. People who work the sea there are deeply worried, as Jack Barton pointed out in his story. Fishermen are complaining that they're going to suffer from this plan. They argue that they simply will not be able to sell what they catch. But it's kind of falling on deaf ears, isn't it?
Yes, I think we have seen on the TV that there's a lot of concern or demonstration from the local fishery, society, and what is more, just early last month we have seen that in the nearby sea, seashore, in the fish. We find that the cesium level is 180 times of this local food standard. So this kind of observation is a little bit contradict to the data shows on the IAEA website. So that means actually a lot of monitoring work need to be carefully done, and also with more transparency and with participation, not just from the IAEA expert group, but also from the neighbor countries.
Yeah, and it's worth noting the oceans are linked. Just because it's dumped in the water there in Japan doesn't mean it stays there. South Korea and China obviously very concerned about this. Also major fishing nations. So this has the potential to affect regional economies as well, doesn't it?
Yes, of course. So I think if we take a look of the ocean circulation, maybe America and Canada may be more dangerous. I mean, the ecosystem, near the Pacific, coast, may be more dangerous than China even. So I think everything should be based on scientific research, monitoring result, numerical modeling, and also, this loss should be also considered, on the options. So because directly discharging them into the sea is not the only option. There's other 4 options, from Japanese, ministry. So I think, the IAEA should be also be carefully also working with the neighboring countries to make sure that, their analysis is inclusive and more scientifically based.
Speaking of the scientific, we had an earlier broadcast today where a scientist in Japan said we can only speculate on the impact. I mean, we've never seen anything like this before. There's no going back if things don't go well. It's uncharted territory. It's a bit of a gamble.
So we can say it's a gamble, but we should say that we need more carefully consideration of different options. For example, there's an option that electrolysis, solidification of those waste could be, energy consuming, could be expensive. But now there's a new technology like solar thermal, maybe help to reduce those costs. So I think, Japanese government and also IAEA should, consider more options to, to give a kind of, cost-effective solution for this contaminated waters.
Yeah, and there's been another concern, of course, which is transparency. There's no real mechanism for regional actors like China or South Korea or other stakeholders to really be involved in terms of oversight. Many of the plan's opponents are also concerned about the presence of tritium. That's a radioactive isotope. It's going to remain in the water that's going to be discharged. Can you talk to us about that aspect of this?
Well, tritium is an important aspect. But the contents of this Fukushima contaminated water is very complex. It's not just tritium. So there's other contents. It's so different than other discharge from the normal operated power stations. Therefore, I think scientifically there should be more budget to do feasibility studies on the potential environmental impact. So a lot of agencies in the world, including China, have already, the result of numerical modeling shows that negative ecosystem environmental impact already there and will be there if those contaminated waters been, discharged directly. But for those small countries in the Pacific Island, like Fiji, like Papua New Guinea, so they don't even have money to do their own, impact assessment. So this is budget consuming, and also for monitoring, there will be more budget consuming. I don't think IAEA now have the budget to, install those devices here and there. In this case, I would suggest, the stakeholders to work together, try to be more carefully consider different options. How to deal with those contaminated waters. Directly discharging to sea is really dangerous.
Yiyang Shen, joining us from Beijing. Thanks so much for your analysis.